And here it is, the first ever Godzilla movie. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the movie that started it all. This was Gojira, or as Americans know it, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Or is it? Now, in case of you guys haven't seen this, I'm going to go at this movie as if no one's ever seen it before, which probably most of you have. But before I do that, I gotta clear up something here. There were actually two versions of this original movie. One that was released in Japan in 1954, and the other one which was released a year later in America under the name Godzilla, King of the Monsters. And the thing is, Gojira, or the Japanese version of it, was actually a really good movie, as I'll show you later. But the American version, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, was actually made for Americans, sort of in conjunction with Toho. See, it starred an American actor, Raymond Burr, who, among other things, is known best as his role as Perry Mason on the Perry Mason Show. And he was a very big star at the time. And thing is, though, he was kind of edited in between bits and pieces of the original Japanese movie. So I guess they thought by having an American actor in there it'd make it more relatable to the American audience, and instead of just dubbing over all the Japanese characters. Which, to a certain extent, I suppose it worked, but it just seemed a bit disjointed and just not right. Now, I'm not reviewing that movie because, even though I've seen it, I don't really like it that much compared to the original Japanese version. And I know a lot of people have the same sentiment. Now, if you like the American version, that's fine. It is good, and I did like Raymond Burr in it. But the thing is, I gotta say, I really want to I'm going to basically go at this by just reviewing the Japanese version, which is the best version I can find of these movies. And that'll be the way it is as I do all the Godzilla movies. They're going to be the Japanese versions, and probably with subtitles. Now, this one was the Japanese version, Gojira, which was in 1954. And that'll be the version I'm going to be referring to. So, yeah. It's a totally different movie, practically. So let's get started. Now, for the actors, well, it doesn't matter who the actors are. They're famous people that I'm sure that are from Japan, and they're also people that showed up, some of them are people that showed up in later Godzilla movies. But for now, I'm just going to refer to them by their character names. So something's going amiss in the ocean. Ships are sinking and no one knows why. So they send out a ship to find out why the other ships are sinking in the exact same place in the ocean, and what do you know, it sinks too! He goes to an island that is in the ocean where these attacks have been happening, and whilst there, the island is terrified of a monster they called Gojira, which is basically just their god they used to sacrifice critters to. Yes, that's right, people. Godzilla was a god. And from various footprints and tail draggings and trilobites later, they figure out that this thing is prehistoric. No, it's not a god, it's a dinosaur from, well, dinosaur times, I guess. And because of recent nuclear testing, it has been awakened from the deep of ocean and released upon the earth to just mess things up. And because they have no other name for it, they're just going to call it Gojira, or Gojira, or however you want to say it. So basically, Godzilla's origin story is that he was a dinosaur, and at some point in time, he just basically survived somehow by living in the very deep part of the ocean and living off of creatures down there. And for some reason, he stayed down there and lay dormant. Until a nuclear bomb went off, and they started testing nuclear bombs, Japan did, and well, voila, it wakes up because, you know, it's a nuclear bomb and that, you know, wakes things up and stuff. And he's also absorbed a lot of radiation, so I guess he's not a normal dinosaur anymore, he's something else. And that's what we call a monster. So Godzilla continues to wreak havoc until he reaches Tokyo and totally levels it. This is just a mess. It's like an apocalypse. It's a sea of flames. Tokyo is engulfed and destroyed. And basically, they gotta find out how to destroy this thing because everything else doesn't work. That's when Dr. Serizawa comes in, a sort of a student of Dr. Yamane's. He has been studying oxygen, which is a boring subject, so he decided how to destroy oxygen, or something like that. And he basically invents a device called an oxygen destroyer, which basically takes oxygen atoms and turns them into liquid atoms, so that destroys oxygen, hence the name. And so he wants to keep this weapon a secret because it could destroy the world. And if we don't, though, the monster could destroy the world, so I guess two wrongs do make it right. No, but he does it anyway. And basically it works. So the first Godzilla is then destroyed. And Dr. Yamane and his horrible, wretched invention is destroyed along with him. And thus we end the first chapter of the Godzilla saga. Now at the time, they didn't know this was going to be a saga, they just thought it was going to be an awesome movie. And it really was. It could have been a standalone movie. It was dark and almost horrific at times. It was really very, very, very well done. It is almost like a noir movie. I mean, you gotta admit, the Japanese were pretty depressed, this only being 9 years after that whole Hiroshima and Nagasaki thing. And, well, I guess Godzilla the movie was pretty much made as a testament to nuclear activity and just how we shouldn't destroy each other with it. Because if we do, a giant monster might come back from the depths of the ocean and destroy us all. But like I said, this movie is actually quite deep and very depressing even at times. It's very sad and very, very well done, I gotta say. I'm not just saying that too because I like Godzilla. I'm saying as a movie, this is very, very well done. And the thing is, I had never really gotten that before I saw the original Japanese version, because if you watch the American version, it basically seems a little bit more like maybe the more hokey American sci-fi flicks of the 50s, and not more of a film of quality standards that this Gojira really needs to be recognized as. And I think over the years it has come to be accepted as that, but it really is a top-notch film. It really is very well done. I mean, the special effects maybe aren't all that great, but it was pioneering in the fact that it was one of the first movies to use a man in a suit, which for, years later would become a staple of Japanese and American alike. And also, it was one of the first movies to use miniatures, like miniature buildings and vehicles, things that Godzilla would stomp on, which was also something that directors and movie makers alike would use for several decades to come. So I guess what I want to say is that this is a very good movie, and it was done so well that I would say it's probably one of the better movies of all time. And it's a horror movie, which you don't see that very often, and I gotta say, the subtitles don't really get in the way. If you watch it with the dubbing and everything, it just kind of looks a little disjointed with all the, the American voices going into the Japanese mouths, which just does not match up very well. So basically what I want to say is, if you're going to watch this movie, the original Japanese version, which if you're going to see Godzilla at all, you should see this one, because this really puts it in a more serious light. Then I definitely think you should see this version with the subtitles. Just, read the subtitles instead of listening to the words. It seems like a bit of a pain in the neck, but I think it's worth it if you really want to have this movie be taken seriously. And I think it really works out that way. I loved it. I don't think I've ever seen it like this before. This was quite a treat in my mind. With the overall solemn tone of the movie, it's kind of funny to think that such things as Godzilla vs. Megalon and Son of Godzilla would come after this. But as a standalone movie, this is a very good movie. And as a jumping off point for an entire saga, maybe not, but at least in this movie we're introduced to the idea of Godzilla. Next, whatever comes next, would be some other sort of monster. And that's pretty much how they, leave it. In that there may be another giant monster that comes and attacks the world, and it could be another Godzilla. In fact, that's what they say. That's what Dr. Yamane says. There could be another Godzilla out there. And that's pretty much how they set themselves up for a sequel, although it could very well be a standalone movie. But then the sequels will be for later, and for now, that was Gojira. It was an awesome movie. I definitely recommend you see it, and in fact, I would give this 5 stars, and I'd have this in my own personal collection, if I had one. So until next time, I'm Creature Hunt Guy, and this was Gojira, and I'll see you later.